Imagine waking before sunrise inside a chilly stone castle. The fire has nearly burned out. Outside, servants are already carrying water across the courtyard while merchants prepare their stalls in the nearest town. Yet before anyone notices your embroidered gown or polished shoes, they notice something else first: your face. In medieval Europe, beauty was rarely considered simple vanity. Appearance quietly announced your family, your wealth, your health, your morality, and sometimes even your closeness to God. Looking beautiful meant looking respectable. Looking respectable meant protecting your family's reputation. It was quite a lot of responsibility for something that began with washing your face in rather cold water. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your opinion, beauty ideals were remarkably specific. The perfect complexion wasn't glowing with a summer tan. Quite the opposite. Pale skin became one of the greatest symbols of privilege. The logic was straightforward. Farmers, shepherds, fishermen, and laborers spent long hours beneath the sun. Nobles remained indoors, surrounded by tapestries, fireplaces, and servants. If your skin stayed pale throughout the year, it quietly suggested that someone else performed the exhausting work for you. It wasn't entirely fair, of course. Skin color revealed only part of a person's life. But status symbols rarely concerned themselves with fairness. Many noblewomen avoided direct sunlight whenever possible. Wide veils shaded their faces. Long sleeves protected their arms. Walking through gardens often meant remaining beneath covered pathways or carrying fabric over the head. Even pleasant weather became something to approach with caution. The irony is difficult to miss. Most people today eagerly seek sunshine during holidays. Medieval aristocrats often treated it as an inconvenient threat to their appearance. Of course, pale skin alone wasn't enough. Smooth skin mattered just as much. Medieval medical texts connected healthy skin with balance inside the body. Red blemishes, scars, or uneven coloring could suggest illness or poor living conditions. Since diseases were common and medicine remained wonderfully experimental, maintaining clear skin became something of a daily ambition. Natural remedies filled household recipe books. Rosewater appeared frequently. Honey served as both medicine and cosmetic. Ground herbs found their way into facial treatments. Milk baths occasionally appeared among wealthier households, although perhaps not nearly as often as modern legends suggest. Transporting enough fresh milk simply to sit inside it required considerable resources, and cows generally had other responsibilities. Still, beauty and health constantly overlapped. A pleasant complexion suggested proper diet. Proper diet suggested wealth. Wealth suggested God's favor. Everything connected together in surprisingly complicated ways. Hair provided another opportunity to display refinement. Long hair represented youth, femininity, and careful grooming. Noblewomen often spent considerable time brushing, braiding, washing, and covering it beneath elaborate veils or decorative head coverings. Ironically, people admired beautiful hair while simultaneously hiding most of it. Fashion has always possessed a delightful ability to contradict itself. Then there was perhaps the most famous medieval beauty trend of all: the forehead. Modern viewers sometimes notice paintings where noblewomen appear unusually high above the eyebrows. That wasn't simply artistic exaggeration. Many women deliberately removed hair along the front of the scalp to create the illusion of an even taller forehead. Why? Because large foreheads suggested intelligence, elegance, refinement, and noble breeding. Yes, people voluntarily plucked perfectly healthy hair in order to make their foreheads look larger. Beauty has inspired stranger decisions throughout history, but this certainly earns an honorable mention. The process was neither especially quick nor especially comfortable. Individual hairs were carefully removed with tweezers or similar tools. Repeating this regularly demanded remarkable patience. One suspects the conversation was rather awkward. "You seem uncomfortable." "I'm becoming fashionable." "Understandable. Carry on." The eyebrows often received similar attention. Instead of thick, expressive brows that many people admire today, medieval fashions frequently preferred extremely thin eyebrows, or barely visible ones at all. The goal wasn't dramatic expression. It was delicate serenity. Religious paintings reinforced these ideals. Saints, queens, and noble ladies appeared calm, composed, and almost impossibly graceful. Art quietly taught viewers what beauty should resemble, just as magazines and social media often do today, only with considerably fewer advertisements for skincare. As morning slowly brightened the castle courtyard, noblewomen prepared for another day surrounded by expectations that extended far beyond clothing alone. Every strand of hair, every inch of skin, every carefully chosen accessory, all communicated something about who they were, or at least who society expected them to become. And that was only the beginning of medieval beauty. Soon, cosmetics, perfumes, luxurious fabrics, and surprisingly uncomfortable fashion choices would make everyday life even more complicated. For now, though, simply imagine the quiet patience required to begin every morning by carefully arranging your appearance according to standards that shifted slowly across generations, all while hoping no unexpected gust of wind revealed the carefully hidden hairstyle beneath your elegant veil. After all, beauty, like history itself, has always demanded a remarkable amount of maintenance. As the morning continues, the castle has fully awakened. Servants hurry through long stone corridors carrying baskets of bread. Somewhere in the kitchens, porridge bubbles gently over the fire. Horses shuffle inside the stables, while church bells drift softly across the countryside. Inside one of the upper chambers, however, another daily ritual is quietly underway. A noblewoman sits beside a polished bronze mirror, not perfectly clear by modern standards, but good enough to inspect the smallest details of her face. Beside her rests a wooden box containing tiny cloth bags of herbs, fragrant oils, combs carved from bone, and small containers filled with pale powders. Unlike modern makeup, medieval cosmetics rarely focused on dramatic colors. Instead, they aimed to perfect nature. Or at least persuade everyone that nature had already been unusually generous. Once again, pale skin remained the highest goal. Various powders were dusted lightly across the face to soften imperfections and brighten the complexion. Wealthier households could afford finer ingredients imported from distant regions, while ordinary families relied upon simpler local materials. Not every cosmetic was particularly safe. Some mixtures contained substances we now know could irritate the skin. Others included minerals that probably seemed perfectly harmless at the time. After all, medieval chemistry often followed a wonderfully optimistic philosophy. If it looks clean, surely it must be good. History repeatedly demonstrated otherwise. Fortunately, many beauty treatments were surprisingly gentle. Rosewater became one of the medieval world's favorite luxuries. Fresh rose petals were distilled into scented water that refreshed the skin and left behind a delicate fragrance. Wealthy households often cultivated rose gardens specifically because these flowers served both decorative and practical purposes. Imagine walking through a castle garden just after sunrise. Tiny drops of dew rest upon deep red petals. The air smells faintly sweet. Bees drift lazily from blossom to blossom. Hours later, some of those same petals may find themselves transformed into perfume or facial wash. The medieval world rarely wasted useful plants. Lavender proved equally popular. Bundles of dried lavender hung from wooden beams inside homes, releasing gentle fragrance throughout the seasons. The scent masked unpleasant odors while also discouraging certain insects from making themselves entirely too comfortable indoors. This was no small advantage. Life inside medieval buildings smelled complicated. Open fireplaces filled rooms with smoke. Animals often lived nearby. Waste disposal remained inconsistent. Bathing occurred less frequently than many people do today, although not nearly as rarely as popular myths sometimes suggest. Contrary to Hollywood's favorite version of the Middle Ages, medieval people did care about cleanliness. They washed their hands. They cleaned their faces. Many bathed whenever circumstances allowed. Public bathhouses operated in numerous towns across Europe, especially during the earlier medieval centuries. Soap existed. Water existed. People generally preferred not smelling unpleasant. Quite relatable, really. The great challenge was not ignorance. It was practicality. Heating enormous quantities of water required time, fuel, and effort. Winter complicated everything further. Stepping into warm water sounded delightful. Stepping back into freezing air immediately afterward, considerably less so. Perfume therefore became especially valuable. Not only among nobles but also among merchants and prosperous townspeople. Small cloth pouches filled with herbs accompanied travelers: rosemary, mint, thyme, sage. Each released gentle fragrance while also carrying symbolic meanings connected with health or protection. Whether they truly prevented illness remained debatable. Whether they smelled pleasant was considerably easier to confirm. Meanwhile, teeth received surprisingly practical attention. Contrary to popular imagination, medieval people did not simply ignore dental care altogether. Various texts recommended cleaning the teeth with cloths, twigs, or herbal powders. Mint occasionally appeared. Salt appeared frequently. Some recipes were undoubtedly more effective than others. One cannot help wondering who first suggested rubbing powdered charcoal across one's teeth and confidently declared the results excellent. Experimentation has always required optimism. Hair demanded equally impressive commitment. Long hair tangled easily beneath elaborate veils and braided styles. Combs became treasured possessions. Archaeologists have uncovered beautifully carved combs made from bone, antler, and ivory across numerous medieval sites. Many appear remarkably elegant. Some include intricate decorations despite being everyday grooming tools. Apparently, even combs deserved artistic attention. Hair itself often carried subtle social messages. Loose flowing hair frequently symbolized youth or unmarried women. Married women usually covered their hair beneath veils, wimples, or elaborate linen coverings. These garments reflected both modesty and status. Fine linen required money. Mint occasionally appeared. Salt appeared frequently. Some recipes were undoubtedly more effective than others. One cannot help wondering who first suggested rubbing powdered charcoal across one's teeth and confidently declared the results excellent. Experimentation has always required optimism. Hair demanded equally impressive commitment. Long hair tangled easily beneath elaborate veils and braided styles. Combs became treasured possessions. Archaeologists have uncovered beautifully carved combs made from bone, antler, and ivory across numerous medieval sites. Many appear remarkably elegant. Some include intricate decorations despite being everyday grooming tools. Apparently, even combs deserved artistic attention. Hair itself often carried subtle social messages. Loose flowing hair frequently symbolized youth or unmarried women. Married women usually covered their hair beneath veils, wimples, or elaborate linen coverings. These garments reflected both modesty and status. Fine linen required money. Mint occasionally appeared. Salt appeared frequently. Some recipes were undoubtedly more effective than others. One cannot help wondering who first suggested rubbing powdered charcoal across one's teeth and confidently declared the results excellent. Experimentation has always required optimism. Hair demanded equally impressive commitment. Long hair tangled easily beneath elaborate veils and braided styles. Combs became treasured possessions. Archaeologists have uncovered beautifully carved combs made from bone, antler, and ivory across numerous medieval sites. Many appear remarkably elegant. Some include intricate decorations despite being everyday grooming tools. Apparently, even combs deserved artistic attention. Hair itself often carried subtle social messages. Loose flowing hair frequently symbolized youth or unmarried women. Married women usually covered their hair beneath veils, wimples, or elaborate linen coverings. These garments reflected both modesty and status. Fine linen required money. Delicate embroidery required time. Both quietly announced that a family possessed resources beyond mere survival. Fashion rarely shouted. It whispered. People nearby understood the language immediately. Jewelry added another layer. Gold rings, silver brooches, strings of pearls. Gemstones imported across remarkable trading networks. Each object reflected not only beauty but prosperity, family connections, and occasionally political alliances. A necklace might represent affection, or inheritance, or diplomacy, sometimes all three simultaneously. Even colors carried meaning. Bright dyes remained expensive. Deep crimson cloth required costly materials. Rich blue fabrics demanded imported pigments. Brilliant green could be difficult to produce consistently. Simply wearing certain colors announced considerable wealth before anyone exchanged a single word. Clothing therefore became part of beauty itself. The finest appearance combined complexion, hairstyle, jewelry, perfume, posture, manners, and fabric into one carefully balanced performance. No single element stood alone. Everything worked together. One begins to appreciate why getting dressed each morning may have occupied rather more time than expected. Of course, these ideals mostly belong to the wealthy. Life looked very different in villages. Peasant women certainly cared about appearance, but survival naturally came first. Fields required tending. Children needed feeding. Animals escaped fences with remarkable determination. Laundry seemed capable of multiplying overnight. Few people had hours available to reshape their hairline while simultaneously baking bread. Instead, village beauty often emphasized cleanliness whenever possible, neatly braided hair, well-maintained clothing, and healthy appearance. Practical beauty. Not effortless beauty. There has never truly been such a thing. Even today's effortless styles often require an impressive amount of effort. Some traditions apparently refuse to disappear. As afternoon sunlight slowly stretches across the castle walls, our noblewoman finally leaves her chamber. Her veil is arranged perfectly. The rosewater has dried. The pale powder rests smoothly upon her skin. Her carefully shaped forehead reflects the latest fashion. She walks through the great hall with calm confidence. No one notices the hour of preparation behind the finished appearance. They simply see elegance. History often remembers the finished portrait, rarely the patient hands that created it. And tomorrow morning, the entire ritual will begin once again. By the time the afternoon sun hangs above the castle walls, the great hall has become noticeably livelier. Merchants arrive with bolts of cloth from distant cities. Noble guests exchange careful greetings. Somewhere, a servant quietly drops a wooden cup, producing the sort of noise that briefly captures everyone's attention before life resumes as though nothing happened. Amid all this activity, clothing continues to speak before anyone says a single word. In the Middle Ages, fashion was not simply about looking attractive. It was about belonging. The fabric you wore, the color you displayed, the length of your sleeves, and even the shape of your shoes quietly announced your place in society. If beauty began with the face, it certainly did not end there. One of the greatest luxuries was cloth itself. Modern wardrobes contain dozens of garments without much thought. A medieval noble might treasure a single beautifully made gown for many years. Creating fabric required enormous amounts of work. First came the sheep, then shearing, cleaning the wool, spinning it into thread, weaving, dyeing, cutting. Sewing entirely by hand. The single elegant dress represented hundreds of hours of labor. Perhaps thousands. Suddenly, accidentally spilling soup on your favorite gown became a far more serious event than it might today. Naturally, expensive clothing encouraged careful table manners. Although history strongly suggests that accidents continued happening anyway, silk remained among the greatest symbols of wealth. It traveled incredible distances through trade routes connecting Europe with Asia. Every piece represented months, or sometimes years, of travel. Merchants crossed mountains. Ships sailed dangerous seas. Caravans moved slowly across deserts. By the time a length of silk reached a European castle, it had already completed a journey far more adventurous than most people ever would. Wearing it quietly announced astonishing prosperity. Velvet gained popularity later in the medieval period. Soft, rich, beautiful beneath candlelight. Unfortunately, also wonderfully effective at collecting dust. Luxury has always required maintenance. Color mattered just as much as texture. Deep crimson remained one of the most admired colors. Creating brilliant red dyes often required expensive imported materials. Likewise, rich blue fabrics could cost remarkable amounts of money. Bright colors reflected wealth because producing them reliably demanded skilled craftsmen and valuable ingredients. Meanwhile, ordinary villagers generally wore undyed wool or simpler natural shades: brown, gray, cream, practical colors for practical lives. No one questioned why. Everyone understood the economics involved. Then there were the sleeves. Medieval fashion occasionally developed an impressive enthusiasm for unnecessarily long sleeves. Some gowns featured sleeves extending well beyond the fingertips. Others trailed gracefully toward the floor. Walking elegantly while managing several extra feet of fabric became something of an acquired skill. One imagined staircases occasionally becoming rather exciting. Fortunately, practice makes graceful. Usually. Of course, beauty frequently competed against practicality. Wide sleeves looked magnificent while standing quietly during a banquet. They became considerably less magnificent when attempting household chores. Fortunately for the nobility, someone else generally performed those chores. Again, fashion quietly reflected social status. Shoes offered another fascinating example. Early medieval footwear remained fairly practical. Leather shoes with rounded toes served everyday needs quite well. Later centuries, however, introduced something rather unexpected: pointed shoes. Extremely pointed shoes. Some became so long that the toes curled upward dramatically. These fashionable creations were known in various regions by names such as polanes. Walking in them required surprising care. Running probably required optimism. Historians still debate exactly how exaggerated some examples became, but surviving illustrations certainly suggest that medieval fashion occasionally embraced delightful absurdity. Apparently, someone looked at ordinary shoes and concluded they simply weren't pointy enough. Fashion, once again, proved wonderfully imaginative. Belts performed double duty. They secured clothing while also displaying wealth through decorative buckles made of silver or finely crafted bronze. Small purses hung from them: knives, keys, perhaps a handkerchief. Medieval clothing generally lacked pockets. Everything traveled upon the belt instead. Imagine carrying your entire daily life from your waist. Rather efficient, really. Jewelry continued completing the picture. Pearls became especially admired because of their smooth white appearance. Their gentle glow complemented the pale complexions considered fashionable among the aristocracy. Gold reflected candlelight beautifully inside castle halls. Silver appeared elegant without seeming excessive. Every precious object quietly reinforced social position. Yet despite all these expensive accessories, one feature remained surprisingly important. Posture. A graceful walk suggested careful upbringing. Slow movements reflected dignity. Standing calmly during conversation communicated confidence. Children from noble families learned these habits early. Beauty was not merely something worn. It was something practiced. Even sitting down possessed unwritten rules. One could hardly slump across a banquet bench while wearing embroidered silk and expect compliments. At least, not the sort one hoped to receive. Of course, maintaining elegance throughout an entire day could become exhausting. Heavy gowns weighed considerably more than modern clothing. Multiple layers trapped warmth during summer. Tight belts restricted movement. Veils required constant adjustment. Jewelry occasionally snagged delicate fabrics. And shoes, particularly fashionable ones, were not always enthusiastic supporters of comfortable walking. Still, appearances mattered. Because beauty represented discipline, patience. Self-control, good breeding. Or at least the appearance of all four. The fascinating irony is that medieval beauty standards often rewarded looking effortlessly graceful while demanding an extraordinary amount of daily effort behind the scenes. Some things, it seems, have remained remarkably consistent across the centuries. Meanwhile, outside the castle walls, village life continued with rather different priorities. Farmers needed sturdy boots. Simple wool tunics, warm cloaks, clothing designed for muddy fields rather than candlelit feasts. Beauty still existed there, of course. Freshly washed linen. Neatly braided hair. A well-mended cloak. Strong hands capable of skilled work. Practical appearance carried its own quiet dignity. Perhaps far more useful than sleeves long enough to accidentally dip into your dinner. As evening slowly approaches, the noble household prepares for another lavish meal. Candles flicker against stone walls. Musicians quietly tune their instruments. Servants smooth tablecloths and polish silver cups until they catch the warm glow of the fire. Every guest entering the hall has spent hours preparing to look effortlessly elegant. Most will succeed. At least until someone drops gravy onto embroidered velvet. History rarely records those moments. Which is unfortunate. They were probably among the most relatable parts of medieval life. And as the candles burn lower, tomorrow's fashions are already waiting, bringing with them new expectations, new discomforts, and new ways of proving that beauty has always been one of history's most demanding occupations. As evening settles over the castle, the great hall glows beneath hundreds of flickering candles. The day's conversations grow quieter. Minstrels pluck gentle melodies from their lutes. The smell of roasted venison, fresh bread, cinnamon, and wood smoke drifts lazily through the air. Guests laugh politely. Goblets are raised. Servants move almost silently between long tables. It appears effortless. Yet even now, beauty remains quietly at work. For medieval appearance was never judged only by clothing or cosmetics. It was judged by behavior. A noblewoman who spoke too loudly could be considered less graceful. One who laughed with her mouth wide open might appear lacking in refinement. Even the way a person accepted a cup of wine or greeted an important guest reflected upon the entire family. Beauty extended far beyond the mirrored. It entered every movement, every smile, every carefully chosen word. Medieval books on manners offered surprisingly detailed advice. Walk slowly. Sit upright. Do not wave your hands excessively while speaking. Avoid eating too quickly. Chew quietly. Never appear greedy. One almost suspects that breathing too enthusiastically may have been discouraged as well. Grace became another luxury. Children born into noble households practiced these habits from remarkably young ages. Young girls learned embroidery not simply because beautiful cloth was useful. Embroidery demonstrated patience. Patience suggested virtue. Virtue reflected good upbringing. Everything connected together like threads inside an elaborate tapestry. Religion strengthened many of these expectations. Throughout medieval Europe, beauty often carried moral meaning. Outer appearance was believed by many to reflect inner character. This did not mean beautiful people were automatically considered good. Far from it. Church leaders frequently warned against excessive vanity. Pride ranked among the 7 deadly sins. Someone who spent too much time admiring their own reflection risked appearing spiritually careless. It created an interesting contradiction. Society encouraged beauty. Religion encouraged humility. People somehow attempted to balance both. It must have required remarkable diplomatic skill. A noblewoman could wear expensive silk, but she should avoid appearing proud of it. She might possess exquisite jewelry, yet she was expected to remain modest. Looking elegant without seeming vain became something of an art form. Not unlike accepting a compliment today by saying, "Oh, this old thing," while secretly hoping everyone notices it. Medieval literature loved this balance. Stories praised queens who were both beautiful and humble. Saints appeared radiant without seeking admiration. Even legendary heroines often possessed physical beauty that reflected kindness rather than pride. The ideal face was calm, gentle, peaceful, rarely dramatic. One notices remarkably few medieval portraits featuring exaggerated expressions. No enormous smiles. No playful winks. No theatrical poses. Portraits preferred quiet dignity. Holding perfectly still for hours probably encouraged that style. After all, painters appreciated cooperative subjects. Then there were mirrors themselves. Unlike today's crystal-clear glass mirrors, many medieval people relied upon polished metal, bronze, silver, occasionally steel. The reflection appeared softer, less precise. Tiny imperfections blurred together beneath flickering candlelight. Perhaps this explains why people occasionally felt more attractive after sunset. The mirror simply became more forgiving. It is difficult to criticize one's complexion when the mirror politely refuses to reveal every pore. Perhaps polished bronze deserves more appreciation. Beauty also changed with age. Youth remained highly admired. Smooth skin, bright eyes, Healthy hair, yet older noblewomen often gained something equally valuable: authority, experience, respect. Gray hair was sometimes hidden beneath veils, but wisdom itself carried considerable beauty. Grandmothers advised daughters. Daughters instructed grandchildren. Recipes for perfumes, herbal remedies, and household cosmetics passed quietly from one generation to the next. Many family beauty traditions survived not inside books but inside conversations. Use the freshest lavender. Always dry herbs before winter. Rosewater works better after washing. Simple advice. Repeated for centuries. Not every trend remained sensible. Some medical theories suggested balancing the body's humors through unusual diets or treatments. Others believed certain gemstones protected health when worn against the skin. Pearls supposedly calmed emotions, emeralds strengthened eyesight. Rubies encouraged courage. Whether these beliefs proved medically effective is another question entirely. They certainly made jewel collections more interesting. Animals occasionally influenced beauty as well. Soft white ermine fur decorated royal garments because it symbolized purity. Falcons resting upon a noble's wrist quietly suggested status. Even tiny lapdogs appeared inside some medieval illustrations, reminding everyone that fashionable companions are hardly a modern invention. People have always enjoyed adorable animals. History remains wonderfully consistent in that regard. Meanwhile, beyond castle walls, ordinary families viewed beauty rather differently. After a long day harvesting grain or repairing fences, clean hands represented success. Fresh clothing meant careful housekeeping. Healthy children reflected capable parents. The village measured beauty less through luxury and more through resilience. One might even argue that surviving another difficult winter became its own form of elegance. As darkness settles completely across the countryside, candles burn lower inside the hall, the musicians finish their final song. Guests begin retiring to private chambers. Heavy gowns are finally loosened. Jewelry is carefully removed and stored inside carved wooden chests. Veils are folded. Combs return to their boxes. Tomorrow morning, the entire ritual will quietly begin again. Not because fashion demanded perfection, but because medieval society believed appearance told a story. Sometimes about wealth. Sometimes about faith. Sometimes about family. Often about all three at once. And although the styles themselves have changed dramatically over the centuries, the hope hidden beneath them feels surprisingly familiar. To look healthy. To appear confident. Impression. Before speaking a single word, history changes its costumes remarkably often. Human nature, perhaps, changes rather less.